the overview here, guys. All right. So the way that I've seen this so far is that there's a few moving parts that we can work with. Number one is unemployment. The number two is these EIDLs, or people call them IDLs slash grants. They're actually a loan slash grant. I'll get into those a little bit more later. The third one is this paycheck protection program. And the fourth one is kind of how do we save cash now? How do we prepare for potentially the worst? Because we just have to be prepared for the next month to four. We're just not sure how this is going to shake out. So there's a lot of really cool things that are coming down the line in that avenue, and I'm going to share some of the ones that I've heard already. And if you guys hear of other things that are going on, email them to me. I'll try to get them out to people because I found there's a lot of ways to scrape up cash in these kind of situations. And I'll kind of go over maybe some of the strategies we're using here at Infront, because I can tell you we're hitting it from every angle. We're trying to cut costs. We're trying to keep revenue. I mean, we are hitting it from every single angle possible. So unemployment, I'm going to give you, again, this is my opinion and my interpretation of what's going on right now through multiple sources, lots of webinars I've been on. I also was talking earlier, I have a friend who is pretty high up in New York State's unemployment department. I spoke to him yesterday. Went to high school with the guy, really nice guy, but he gave me kind of an update. And let me go over this and kind of get into some of what I think is going on. So if you need to, right now, unemployment is a little bit more like a vehicle for people. If you have W-2 employees, to be able to park some people into unemployment for a period of time, so that they're not completely starving and you're not, having to shell out a ton of money as a business owner to keep them on the payroll if you don't need them. A lot of companies are experiencing, revenue losses right now because basically, for all practical purposes, the federal government just drove an F-150 through all of our living rooms. And now we need to get paid to cover the damages. And that's what we're all trying to figure out right now is what are they going to pay us and how is this going to work? So my understanding right now is the Fed is going to add $600 a week to the state unemployment portion. They're saying, from New York, my buddy there, it is an epicenter, but he said he's worked 19 days straight. Literally everybody in the New York unemployment office is working full-time every day from home nonstop. We've got managers, everybody processing applications. They are pulling their hair out. They're going as fast as they can. Their IT departments are freaking out, trying to get everything into place for people as quickly as possible. So that kind of gives you an idea. I asked him about two things. I said, when it comes to the 1099, how does the state of New York look at that? Because that's kind of a vagueness right now. It's like, okay, well, if I'm a W-2 employee and I get put on to unemployment, right, the way that it works right now is the state's going to give me their portion of unemployment that they're entitled to give me underneath state laws. And then the federal government is going to kick in an additional $600 a week on top of that for me if I was on unemployment as a worker. So when I asked about the 1099s, his attitude was that 1099 people need to have all their information together as far as all of their 1099s that they've gotten in past years, so they got an idea of the income. But he really alluded to at this point in the game that, and it's going to be state by state, but as far as the state of New York was concerned, they were not really doing anything with the 1099 people as far as giving them money. They were just going to process them and then give them the Fed portion, which was the $600 a week. So it's a really weird dynamic there. I'm not 100% sure when it comes to 1099 workers how that's going to work. I think at a minimum, for sure, they'd be entitled to $600 a week of the Fed portion. And like I said, anybody who's going to get unemployment, if they have to, if it's people you're laying off, encourage them to do it immediately because it's taking – in Colorado, I've gotten firsthand information that there's a 4-week waiting period before you – not waiting period, but 4 weeks before they're actually going to process this stuff and you actually start seeing money, okay? So it is all going to be retro, by the way, guys. And the other thing I was going to say is, like I said, it's on here. New York they don't even know how to get the $600 from the Fed into the people's hands yet, okay? They don't know how to do it. And that's the state of New York, the epicenter. So I imagine this is going to start to really unfold this week more, so we'll have more details on it. But as it stands right now, still some ambiguity on the unemployment with respect to 1099 workers when the Fed amount's going to be coming out and whatnot. I did this as an example. And I just wanted to kind of show you some ways, if you have W-2 employees, to utilize the unemployment system a little bit. And it's kind of bizarre, but I gave an example of 4 people. And this is a rough calculation based on what I found on the state's website in Colorado and how it would break down. So person number 1 makes $25,000 a year. If they go on unemployment in Colorado, Colorado will pay, rough numbers, don't quote me, but rough numbers based on their calculations, because there's 2 different ones they can use, about $240 per week, okay, is what they would get from Colorado State. If you add in the unemployment from the Fed, $600 a week, that actually annualizes out to $43,700 a year. So in other words, from April, if they went on unemployment April 1st and they were collecting through July 31st, and you put them on unemployment, for those 4 months, they would get a raise effectively. That person there, the $25,000 worker, would get a raise effectively of $1,558 per month, okay, if you put them on, park them in unemployment. You take a $30,000 employee, same thing. They're going to effectively get a $1,350 a month raise if you put them on unemployment. They're trying to get this liquidity out into the system as quickly as possible and try to get money in people's hands so that they can, pay rent and all that stuff and buy groceries and get the economy cooking again. So you can kind of see even up to $60,000 a year still works out for somebody being unemployment as far as compensation goes. Okay, obviously they're gonna have to deal with the headaches of processing and all that stuff over the next 4 months, but next month or so probably. Hopefully I'll get in. But that's kind of a quick calculation on how this stuff works out. Does anybody have any questions on the unemployment piece? Okay, I'm going to move on to the EIDLs. Just about any real business can apply for the EIDL. Private nonprofits are also eligible for grants and stuff through the EIDLs. I want to kind of give you a quick, at least my interpretation of a quick background of what an EIDL is, or what it's supposed to be, and kind of what has happened, just so you can understand. EIDLs are loans, technically, that the federal government would give out when there's disasters. Now, because this is so prolific and crazy, they literally took down the normal applications on the SBA website, and they put up an express app for this EIDL 10K. Okay, and I'm going to get into that in a little bit more detail as far as how it's working. But your traditional EIDLs would be way more money. You could get way more money than $10,000, but they had to process this and get it out as quickly as they could. So they're trying to get up to 10K as quickly as possible into business hands. Okay, and then I'll tell you what kind of how the EIDL transfers into the payroll protection program, because that's the other program that's kind of after that. So basically, it's for any SBA EIDL loans made in response to COVID-19 before the end of the year. All personal guarantees are waived on the loans in advances below $200,000. Okay, the requirement is being waived that you need to be in business for 1 year before the disaster. Credit elsewhere requirements are also waived, so you don't have to have like credit lines elsewhere. During the coverage periods, allows the SBA to approve and offer EIDL loans based solely on the applicant's credit score, or use an appropriate alternative method for determining applicant's ability to repay. They're really kind of being a little bit loose, at least in the terminology, for these loans right now. Establishes an emergency. This is what I was talking about, where normally you could go get, $2 million or whatever. But they took all that off the website in the SBA, and they just put this $10,000 express loan, which is the thing you're seeing at the bottom, that last line item. Established emergency grant to allow eligible entity who has applied for an EIDL loan due to coronavirus 19 to request an advance on that loan for not more than $10,000, which the SBA should distribute. Don't want to put must. That was their terminology. Should distribute within 3 days. So here's the deal, guys, and I'll recap this in a minute. If you think you need money now, whether or not you're going to go for the payroll protection program or not, if cash is a concern, you may want to go and apply for the EIDL right away on the SBA website. I applied last Monday, guys. It is now Monday. I have not seen the money. So 3 days, it's not. We're going on 6 now, okay? At least for me. I will let you guys know if you want when I get it. I know a few other people that have applied. I have not heard anybody getting that money yet direct deposited from the Fed into their bank accounts for the 10K. Okay. Um, Okay. Okay. It established that the applicant should not be required to repay advance payments even if they are denied by the EIDL loan. So let me give you an example. If you go in and apply for the EIDL, my understanding is you're going to get up to $1,000 per full-time employee. Up to $10,000 is what you can get right now. Okay, and that's the one that they're saying you should get within 10 days. So, like I said, it's one. I heard it was $1,000 per full-time employee. Up to 10K is the advance. If you go and apply for that, and they give it to you, because they do ask you how many employees you have when you fill it out. They also ask you what your gross receipts were last year, what your cost of goods sold were last year, and just basic information around your company, when it was started, who the shareholders are. It really is an easy form, guys. It's literally 3 pages, and it's click, 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 finish. If you have your financials in front of you as far as just sales and cost of goods sold and basic company information, it's probably 15, 20 minutes. It says on the thing it could take up to 2 hours, but if you have just regular basic info, you can fly right through it. Now, if they, like what it says in here basically is if they give you, let's say you applied for it and they gave you 10,000 and you just stopped there, you didn't go for any other program, as long as they gave it to you, it's forgiven. Okay. If they gave you 2,000 or 1,000, it's forgiven. If they give you 10,000, it's forgiven. Okay. They're not going to basically ask for people to repay that portion back. And we'll get into what happens when you move it into the PPP in a minute. In advance of disbursing advance payment, SBA will verify the entity's eligible applicant. They're just asking you to certify that you're legit. Outlines the advance payment to be used for provisioning paid sick leave employees. Okay, yeah. So you're really supposed to be, technically, you're supposed to be using this money for appropriate purposes, which would be sick leave, any kind of payroll, trying to keep your payroll up, any kind of costs that were associated with the disruption, whether it's supply chain. You know, if you're a restaurant, you got to throw away a whole bunch of fresh fruits and vegetables. I mean, there's stuff like that in here that they would call it as eligible. Okay. And like I said, we're assuming that the government will be processing the EIDL loan grant, but the new systems, I think they just couldn't get it out quick enough to process the $10,000 grant piece with an entire loan on top of it. Okay. They just could. The SBA couldn't handle it because those are kind of done, as far as I know. They can be done through a lender, but the SBA was taking them direct too before. So, like I say, right now, kind of the moral of the story is, if you want to try to go for the 10 grand, you can do it. It's pretty quick. There's really not a huge amount of downside. I've even told people, hey, if you get it and you're worried that they might ask for it back, if you don't need it, park it in a savings account and wait till, if you think they're going to ask for it back, you know, you can do it. If you're paranoid about it, I feel pretty confident based on the information that I've gotten that whatever they grant to you and they give to you, you can keep. Okay, but it's supposedly gauged on the $1,000 per full-time employee. Payroll protection plan is a lot more complicated. It's been evolving over the past couple of weeks. You know, we kind of, I like to say we got the marketing information first, the feel good. Hey, this is going to be great, guys. And then the devil's in the details. And now we start seeing, well, it's still cool, but it wasn't as cool as it was before. At least as cool as it was at a 50,000-foot view without the details. So what is the payroll protection program? It's really designed for employers to get money in the form of a loan. It's structured like a loan with a whole bunch of forgiveness, meaning you wouldn't have to pay back a whole bunch of it. And the reason they're doing that is they want us to keep people on the payroll. And they're doing it as like an 8-week bridge. And I'll get into a little bit more detail of how all that works out. But again, eligibility, pretty straightforward. Fewer than 500 employees in your normal business, you're going to get in. Sole proprietors, independent contractors, other self-employed individuals are also eligible. I am not 100%, and I know that there's people here that are sole proprietors, independent contractors, and self-employed individuals. I am not 100% sure on the details of that, guys. I will say, and I'll say it a million times, get with an SBA lender ASAP, yesterday, find one. I can give you a list. There's tons of them in the state of Colorado. In fact, I saw a news report on Friday at the end of the day, it was probably 4 o'clock. They came out because they just started writing the paper for these PPP loans. They finally allowed them to start writing the loans and the grants, and they basically said that most of the loans that were processed on Friday were done by small community banks, not by the big box providers. Okay, the big box guys have got to mobilize. They got to do the integration with the IT. They've got to, they want to be able to just pump stuff into their system and click submit, 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 because they're a big bank. The little banks are used to paperwork, so even though they're getting kind of a hodgepodge from the SBA saying, hey, these are the guidelines, this is how you're going to write the loan, they're used to being able to look at that and go, okay, we'll figure it out, we can get through it, and we'll just do it by hand and push them through. So the SBA small lenders are really great right now, just because the kind of they're like the front line, and their massive network. I think once the big banks mobilize, they're going to be processing these loans really fast. And I think that, if you're already working with an SBA lender or bank, get in touch with them. Like I was in touch with mine 2 weeks ago, and waiting in the wings for them to give me an application, which they came out with a pre-app. They came out with a pre-app like last week. That was last Monday actually, and I got it submitted. If anybody wants my SBA lender, they're out of Florida. It's a small community bank. They seem to do a pretty good job. I can send them that info too. Just put something in the chat window if you want it. I can also send a link out to everybody. If you have a really big business, if you have it's some businesses with more than 500 employees per location will be eligible, but they're kind of trying to deal with franchises. So they want to make sure, they're saying, hey, if you have 500 people per location or under, then you can still be eligible. So I'm going to go into some of this, some of the details here on this, and it could get confusing. If people have questions, feel free to unmute yourself and just ask a question in the middle. We're not a huge group right now, so I don't have a problem with you interrupting me. Because questions, I've found Q&A in all the webinars I've been in, it's the most valuable piece for people. Basically, lenders have to determine if the business was operational on February 15th and had employees and paid salaries or paid independent contractors. There's no prior cash flow adjustment, so they're not going to adjust for before the 15th. Borrowers must make a good faith certification to load in the necessary due to the Corona-19 virus. I mean, I can't think of a business, well, I can think of some that haven't, but I mean, the majority of businesses out there are affected by it, period, end of story. I mean, medical, dental, you name it, construction, I mean, everybody. Restaurants. You can't receive duplicate funds for the same uses under the SBA program. So this next one down below it ties the two together to give you an idea. So the EIDL, which was the 10K one we were talking about before, if you get the EIDL and they give you the 10K, then you decide to go for the Paycheck Protection Program, this PPP, then what they're going to do is they're going to consider the 10K that you got from the first one as an advance on the forgiven amount on the PPP. So if you're going to do the EIDL 10K and then go for the PPP, you're not double dipping. So I can't go into the EIDL and say, give me 10 grand, and then go in for the PPP and then apply for all the same stuff. And they're going to include the 10 grand in it. They're going to we already advanced you 10 grand on the first program. Okay. So that comes off of the forgiven amount. And we're going to get into a little bit more detail about how that forgiven amount works. And again, I can't stress it enough. Talk to an SBA lender ASAP if you're going to go for these programs. Get it in the works, because you just got to get in the queue. I don't know how long these loans are going to take to process. So basically, the covered loan period will be your anticipated expenses from February 15th to June 30th. Loan amounts they're increasing the loan amounts up to $10 million for businesses through the end of the year based on their payroll size. You can use the money for payroll support, employee salaries, paid sick leave, medical leave, insurance premiums, mortgage, rent on your if you have a commercial loan, rent on the loan, and your utility payments. You must maintain 75% of payroll as compared to the previous period to get full forgiveness amount. Otherwise, it will be prorated. This is where things get tricky, guys, and I'm going to try to explain it, but I can tell you, until you sit down with an SBA lender, you're not really going to know exactly how this is going to play out, and you're going to want to strategize with the SBA lender on how much you want to ask for, okay, or how much you're entitled to ask for, and how much you think you're going to need, and do some speculation on how much they're going to forgive or not. Okay, and like I said, there's quite a few slides on this, so I'll get into it. I know you guys will have questions on it because it is weird. So they raised the loan limits on this one to 10 million. Average monthly pay. So the way that they're calculating how much you can borrow is they're basically saying, what was your average monthly payroll in 2019? And then you can get 2.5 times that. So if your average payroll was $100,000, then you can get $250,000. That's the most you can borrow under the program, is 2.5 times your payroll from 2019. It's eligible, is, like I said, healthcare benefits, salaries, commissions, interest payments, mortgage obligations, rent, utilities, interest on any other debt before the cover. Well, I can't remember what that one was on. I apologize, guys. Interest on any other debt before the covered period. I can't remember what that bullet is for. I apologize, guys. You can borrow, like I said, you can borrow 2.5 times the monthly payroll. What can potentially be forgiven is 2 months of payroll plus rent, utilities, and mortgage and interest. So I'm gonna go back to that example. Let's say your payroll is $100,000. I like easy numbers. You can borrow $250,000. That's what they'll allow you to borrow under the program. They will forgive $200,000 worth of payroll expense. In other words, that's 2 months. So you borrowed 2.5 times, but they're going to forgive 2 months worth of payroll. They will also forgive your rent, utilities, mortgage interest, and that stuff, right? There's a caveat here. If you took the $250,000, you got to spend 75% or more of it on payroll. You can only spend 25% of that on other stuff for it to be forgiven. Okay, so if you got the $250,000 and 75% was payroll and 25% was or less was meant rent, mortgage, taxes, utilities, and all that, then it should be forgiven. Okay, that full amount should technically be forgiven. So you can borrow more. That can be nice to some degree. I haven't really figured out if it has a really nice silver lining yet or not. Kind of depends on how quick this recovery is. If the recovery is not as quick, it's not going to offer any kind of opportunities for a lot of companies to maybe consolidate debt, things like that, with those monies. But we'll see. If it's quicker, then it's going to be a lot nicer. So again, I'll just repeat. Payroll costs include salaries, wages, commissions, cash tips, vacation, personal time, family medical leave if somebody's out. I think bigger companies have to give people 2 weeks paid medical leave if they're caring for somebody or if they get sick from COVID-19. The healthcare premiums are covered. Your pre-retirement, if you're doing IRA company matches on IRA contributions, those are covered as well. And state and local taxes related to employment are covered as well underneath this. So those are all eligible forgiveness things. If you're an independent contractor, if you're a full-time employee or independent contractor, or anybody who's making like $100,000 or more, you can only include the first $100,000 in your calculations, guys. So if somebody's making $150,000 a year, or you have a few people in that range, you cannot apply for the loan for the full $150,000 for each one of those people. You got to cap theirs at $100,000. Okay. So that's kind of important to know when you're doing your calculations. Don't just, if it's somebody's making 150, just stop them at 100. That's all I can put into this calculation to get the loan. Right now they're talking $350 billion. I think I heard this morning they've already processed $5 billion since Friday, and I was only like 2,000 or 3,000 loans maybe. The loans are guaranteed 100% by the U.S. government, which is nice because the SBA lender has no exposure on these loans. They are term loans. There will be no borrower fees for participating in the program, so there's no underwriting fees for us. There's no credit elsewhere tests, so you don't have to actually go. If you could get credit elsewhere, the SBA traditionally would say go get it somewhere else. There's no collateral personal guarantee requirements under the program. You don't have to put up your house, your car, your children, your dogs, or anything like that. Any loan amount that is not forgiven after June 30th this is what I've heard, it will amortize over 2 years, okay? I originally heard 10 years, up to 10 years. Now I'm hearing 2 years. with a max. I heard a max interest rate of 4%, but now I'm hearing 1%. So again, maybe both are true. I don't know. And everything in between. Originally, it was 10 years, max of 4%. Now I'm hearing 2 years, max of 0.5%. Now 1%. This is kind of changing by the day. And there's no prepayment penalties. That's kind of important, guys. This is a crazy time, and if you can go out and get this money from the Fed, even if you're parking it in your savings account, there's no prepayment penalties. So you could go in, apply for this. You've got a nice cushion. You're sitting on it. Try to keep as many people on as you can and mitigate this situation. And then let's say at the end you're like, oh well, I didn't really need all that money. Here's 50 grand back. They might grant you. They're going to grant you a whole bunch of it. But let's say there was $50,000 left that you would then maybe that wasn't grantable, that would have to turn into a loan. You could just give them the 50 grand back and say, I don't want the loan. I don't want the 2-year loan at 1%. You guys can keep the money. You can take the money back. All I want is the grant portion, the free part. These loans are non-recourse unless found to be used for unauthorized purposes. So as long as you're not defrauding the government, you're in good shape. Loan payments will be deferred. I heard between 6 months to a year. I've heard pretty solid at 6 months. So if you go into the Paycheck Protection Program, you get the 2.5 times monthly payroll figure as a loan. They'll wait till the end of June. They'll look back and say, hey guys, did you keep people on payroll for those 8 weeks? That's really important. Okay, everybody listen to this. This is super important. If you go for the Payroll Protection Program, from the day that the loan is originated, they're going to look at an 8-week span to see if you reduced your employees too much. Okay, you don't want more than a 25% reduction in employee in payroll. Okay, in that 8-week period. Okay, so this is where the balance comes in. Like I say, you want to talk to your SBA lenders. There's a balance here between, if you need to park people in unemployment, you can do that. But and then you can go apply for this loan, but you're going to want to try to get people back, either get people back onto the payroll as soon as you can, if it's feasible, try to get them back onto the payroll during that, by the end of June. Okay. Because it helps with your calculations. What they don't want to happen, guys, is you say, hey, listen, I'm borrowing $250,000 because my payroll is $100,000 a month. They write the loan today, and then tomorrow you put everybody on unemployment. Okay, that's a bad scenario. They don't want you to do that. In other words, they're going to say, we're not going to forgive any of it. So if you go over, the moral of the story is if you end up reducing your employees by more than 25% over that 8-week period compared to the previous period, and I can show you guys a calculation on it. It's very confusing. Again, this is more of something to deal with your SBA lender to figure out the details on, because it's confusing. They can use multiple formulas. It's weird. Let me see here. So here's the information on the eligibility on the loan forgiveness part. So again, amounts spent by the borrower during the 8-week period of the origination date of the loans for payroll costs, so that's 8 weeks for payroll, guys. Then they do allow you to use interest payments on any mortgage incurred from February 15th up through the end of June. So that most of these things are an 8-week thing for payroll, but there's other things like the rent, the utilities, and the mortgage interest and stuff that they'll go all the way back to February 15th to June 30th as part that would be forgiven. Okay. So that's all these here. Amount forgiven cannot exceed the total loan amount. Okay, so if you borrow $250,000, you can't get more than that. Eligible payroll costs do not include, like I said, people who make over $100,000 in wages. They're saying that they're going to compare the wage expense to the previous year. I'm seeing other calculations too that do it to a previous period. So again, that's why I'm saying talk to a lender. This stuff is changing constantly. So the amount forgiven would be reduced proportionally by any reduction in employees retained compared to the prior year, and reduced by the reduction in pay of any employee by 25% of their prior year compensation. So that's why that 25% figure comes in. I did a calculation just to be safe. And what I did is I said, well, what did I spend on payroll last year? And what is it going to look like in this 8-week period, given that I had to furlough some people into unemployment? And then I also did another calculation where I said, well, What if it was just the previous 8 weeks from the 8 weeks? So I tried to cover both bases and compare the percentage drops just to see what the difference was. Okay. Anybody have questions on that? That's a mouthful. Nothing as of yet. Okay. Everybody's either drinking coffee or let me see. Okay. All right. Again, it's to encourage employers to rehire any employees who have already been laid off due to the crisis. Borrowers that rehire workers previously laid off will not be penalized for having a reduced payroll at the beginning of the period. So it's like if you laid somebody off and brought them back on, that's the best thing you can do. The goal here is to get people back on payroll as quickly as possible once you get the money, if it makes sense. They also are allowing additional forgiveness for like tipped workers, bartenders, waitresses, things like that, people work in hotels. Borrowers will verify through documentation lenders their payments during the period. So you're going to have to, there's going to be a look back period, and they're going to want to kind of audit what your payroll was and your expenses were before they figure out if they're going to forgive the loan or not. This is kind of cool. Canceled indebtedness resulting from this section will not be included in the borrower's taxable income. Hey, that's kind of nice. So if they grant you $100,000, they're not going to tack it onto your income return. That's kind of nice. Any loan amounts not forgiven at the end of 1 year are carried forward as an ongoing loan with the. So this is again, I heard 10 years at 4%. I heard 2 years at 1%. So again, whatever they're not forgiving, it converts into a loan unless you give it back. And just, guys, here's some things I've been brainstorming, talking to different people, and I just want to get this out there because I want to say we're all in on this together, guys. We're in it. Our banks are in it. Our lenders, our auto companies, mortgages, everybody is really in on this, okay? And we have to figure it out. So what I found is you got to ask, guys. You just got to go ask. If time is important, and you think the EIDL $10,000 thing is applicable for you, go apply for it. It's right on the SBA site. And again, I can send a link out to that too. Get with your SBA lender yesterday. If people want names of them, again, there's a whole bunch of them. I personally chose a small one. That was just a decision based on the fact that I was already working with them. Like literally this week, a big bank could come out and be like, we can process them in 24 hours. That would be sweet too. I don't know. So keep your eyes and ears open. Anybody hears anything cool, let us know. This is really nice. If anybody has an SBA loan already, the federal government is basically paying your mortgage and your principal and interest on your SBA loans for the next 6 months. It's forgiven. Bye-bye. That works out really well for people if they have an SBA loan. There's no payments for 6 months or interest. It's all just paid. It's not deferred or anything. Vendors, this is a big one. I can tell you in my company, we put the marketing team and the dev teams out, and we said, call every one of our vendors that we work with, software companies that provide software systems for us and everything. And we called them up and said, what can you guys do for us? We're getting hit with revenue drops. What can you do? You'd be surprised. Some of them gave us free service for 2 months. Some of them said, hey, we'll delay the payments and you can pay them in August. I mean, it just totally depends, but you got to ask. I think it's really important for people to just get out there. I mean, if you're carrying inventory in particular, that's a big one. If you're in construction or anything like that, you could have $100,000 of materials out. There's just, you want to work this as best you can. With the lenders, again, that's another one. I know Wells Fargo in particular, if you got a mortgage with them, you go onto their website, you literally have a button right next to it. You click, I want to defer my payments for 90 days, click, click, click. And they're like, it's literally done right there that second. And they're going to send, I did it. They're going to send me a letter. I'm like, yeah, put my mortgage on hold. Why not? Send me a letter. So they're going to send me a letter on more details. I'm hearing different things about that with respect to mortgages in that, some of them are saying that if it's a federally backed loan, that the federal government has basically told the lenders that they basically should allow you to forgive your up to a year for payments or tack them onto the end or something like that. I'm hearing a lot of different scenarios here, but I can tell you, just even with Wells Fargo, they took the initiative and said, here, you can have 3 months off. Okay. I would encourage credit cards, lines of credit, anything like that. Also, if you already have a line of credit, it wouldn't hurt to go in and talk to your banker, let them know, especially if they're your SBA lender as well. Guys, I'm going for the PPP. I'm going for this, but I'm going to need a line of credit to bridge this, you know. So can you expand my line of credit in the short term while I get this federal funding in place with you guys? So that's another option to talk to your banks about as well. Landlords, same kind of thing. I'm hearing, I saw some stuff in the legislation for federally backed loans, that there's some forgiveness there for landlords. Still some ambiguity there, like I said, for me on it. It only had to do with really federally backed loans. If somebody owns the property outright as a landlord, they're really not getting much except for some tax breaks I saw for capital improvements. But I would definitely talk to landlords too. Like I said, if you got rent, things like that, go talk to them. Even if it's personal, if you rent an apartment or something like that, go ask. You know, see what they'll do. Some of them will defer the rent, especially if they're getting some reprieve on their end. You know, if you're a landlord and the Fed's going to give you reprieve, you know, on your mortgage payment, then they might be more apt to give reprieve to some of the people that are renting from them, or give them some kind of an alternative plan to pay. Because really, what I see in the next 30 days is there's going to be a cash flow glom up. I mean, it's not, I don't see it freeing up till we get through the end of the month anyway, because a lot of people right now, I will tell you, even in our business, credit card declines are way up. I mean, even in the last 2 weeks, way up, like ridiculous. So it's going to be a credit crunch. It's going to be a cash crunch. So, you know, as much as you can do right now to prepare yourself for this until these relief funds get available, I encourage you to do it. Okay. Hit it from every angle, reduce costs. As an example, guys, today I will have a sales meeting this afternoon with my team. We will look at every single account. We'll know who's canceled, and we will literally redo our budget every week. We're going to be redoing it every week this month. I'll guarantee you we have to redo it every week, because it is changing daily for us. As far as, like I said, high credit card declines, customers putting programs on hold, you name it. There's a lot going on there. We don't blame them. I mean, if you're a restaurant, it's like, do I market right now? I can't service people. So we totally get it. And this one's really important. I have seen an increase in scam emails and short-term loan emails like you would not believe right now. Be careful. A lot of these are really toxic short-term loans, extremely expensive. They're crazy. So just be really careful about this. My suggestion again is get with an SBA lender yesterday and start having that conversation with them so they can start processing your stuff. So that pretty much wraps up the overview of what I wanted to give you guys. So if anybody has questions, I'm going to open it up now. You just unmute yourself and fire away if you have any specifics, and I'll answer them as best I can. No questions? Everybody's pretty content? All right. Well, good deal. I have this recorded. I can send out a recording if anybody wants to forward it to anybody.
Hey, should I go see my bank today?
Oh, Spencer, absolutely. Yes. Yes, do it. Absolutely do it.
Just talk to the loan officer there?
Go talk to whoever will see you. Even if they won't see you, call them. I mean, I literally, I'll give you an example. There was a lady with my SBA lender that she would just email me my invoice each week, right? Well, as soon as this went down 3 weeks ago, I started emailing her. I'm like, well, she's in the billing department. At least I got somebody, you know?
Okay.
So I started talking to her. I'm like, when are you guys going to be writing these PPP loans? Please let me know, and all that stuff. And eventually it was about a week, and then all of a sudden, boom, I got an email, and I was like, here's the application, go fill it out. I was like, beautiful. So I would say talk to whoever you can, get whoever you can on the phone for sure.
Okay, I know the small town personal bankers, so I should probably just get a hold of one of them and let them kind of guide me into what I should do.
Totally. That's what I would do personally. Unless you got I have some clients that are bigger companies that are working with, TD Bank or, Wells Fargo or Chase, and they're going to obviously try to stick with them, and they hopefully have their ear.
Employees real easy.
Yeah, they have a lot of employees, almost 200 employees, some of them. So those guys are a little better suited there. I think most of the small businesses, I think you'd be better suited at a small local SBA bank. I know Five Star Bank in town is an SBA lender. There's a whole bunch of them.
I bank up here in Woodland Park, so maybe Park State Bank.
Yeah, yeah. And I even heard I'm getting the same feedback. There's a group out in New England that I did a conference call with on Saturday, and they're up in Maine. And literally, the only loans I've heard processed were little banks. It was Kennebunk Savings Bank. I mean, tiny little bank in Maine, and they're pushing the loans through. So that's why like I say, I'm an advocate for the little guys right now, just because it seems like they mobilize quicker because they don't mind doing things with paper.
Well, hey, thanks a lot. I've listened to this whole deal. It's really informative. I really appreciate it.
Oh, I'm glad it helped. And again, if anybody, you guys have my email, you have my phone number. This stuff is changing daily. I'm getting new information from clients, from business coaches, from accountants, from everybody. So I'm getting information constantly on this to stay up on it. So if anybody wants to, call me. If you got questions, I'll try to help you. Just give me a call. My number's in there. Just shoot me a line.
Hey, I got one more short one.
Yeah, go ahead.
If I go to see the banker, should I already have my PPP form filled out?
They're going to ask you to fill it out anyway. I know mine did. And then they asked for 12 months worth of payroll, like a payroll report for 12 months, basically like February 2019 through January 2020. They
Right.
also asked for my driver's license, and they asked for my last filed tax return.
Okay, perfect.
So those were the ones they asked me for, right out of the gate. But you could fill out that little paper application, because that's what my bank did. They just took the paper application, threw it into DocuSign, and then allowed you to upload documents into it too.
Right. Well,
so it was pretty quick.
All my payroll comes right out of the bank anyway. They know what it is.
Yeah, they should have a pretty good idea of all of that. But yeah, that's great. I mean, I would go talk to them and mobilize that and get it going yesterday.
Hey, right on. Thanks. I'll be there. I'll be there yesterday.
Yeah, I know. Awesome, Spencer. Well, cool. Does anybody else have any other questions for me? All right, guys. Well, if you have any questions, give me a call, email me, and I will send out an email here shortly with some follow-up with information on just some valuable links and stuff if you guys want to cross-reference it. I'll just send that out too, and I'll send out the recording.
Thanks so much,
All right,
Matt.
everybody.
We appreciate it.
Wow, my pleasure. You guys have an enjoyable week. Keep your head up and keep swinging.
Will do.
All right, guys. Cheers.
Bye-bye.